What's up, guys? Mitch from Respect My Region, back at home in the Seattle area after a few weeks on the road. Was down at Hall of Flowers for only day one, and then took a quick trip to the East Coast to Boston for the Boston Cannabis Week events. I was only there for about 2 days of really 52, 56 hours, real quick stop in Boston. My first time seeing the Atlantic Ocean and being on the East Coast soil. But obviously being on the West Coast, very, very familiar with cannabis, especially the recreational, adult use, medical, whatever market you want to call it. But my impressions on the Massachusetts market, if I could sum it up in one word, it would be excitement. People were very excited for cannabis to be legalized. I believe adult use recreational sales started there in later 2018, but it was a very limited supply and amount of stores. And then 2019 is when it started to ramp up. Obviously, COVID hit. So right around the time their market was starting to heat up, COVID struck, and then there's restrictions and regulations that didn't allow meeting in person and events and things that really help kind of connect a community and a culture and just people talking in person about things. So being out there right around the time events are starting to open back up, and especially at Boston Cannabis Week, people were excited. They were excited that, in-person events were coming back, networking was coming back, and kind of the community and culture aspect surrounding cannabis in the industry was really starting to bubble and come back, and not necessarily just come back, but come alive right around the time, adult use cannabis has arrived, if you will. So now having that community and that culture be inserted around the legality of recreational cannabis, people were just excited. From consumers I was talking to was just excited that there's more choices on the market, more stores coming on. People that are within the industry seem really excited about just the opportunities at hand. It's interesting. Massachusetts rolled out their market. I believe you can correct me in the comments if I'm incorrect. I'm not an expert on that particular state, so I'll just give that forewarning. But the way that I'm in the understanding that they rolled out their market was that it was originally medical, and to get a medical license, you needed to be vertically integrated, meaning that you cultivated and produced all your products and had the storefront for retail. That model is obviously very expensive because you're not just buying one business or a piece of a business. You need to have the whole funnel in your control, which is more cost of licensing, more cost to staying compliant, and just more cost of infrastructure, real estate, labor, all of that. It's a much more expensive thing. So when you set up a vertically integrated only market like we're seeing in Florida and things like that, only big money players can play the game. There is no craft brands. There is no room for people to get a smaller license and build a small or a micro business. It's only big box businesses, if you will. And so when it switched to adult use, those medical companies were kind of the first ones to get to chomp at the bit at recreational. So that means your selection and what's available on the market is really only big money or commercial or MSO, aka multi-state operator, cannabis offerings. And so being someone that comes from the West Coast and especially lives in the Pacific Northwest, where craft remains true as a long-time consumer of quality West Coast cannabis, I like to consume craft brands, not just because they're craft and local and I know them, but also because you can simply grow a better product when you have a smaller, more controlled environment. It's simple. No matter what you're making, if you're hand making it in small batches, it's more than likely has the potential to be a much more quality product than a mass-produced at scale, commercialized anything. Whether we're talking about clothing to woodworking to cannabis, anything, usually craft will breed better quality. And so we've seen that across the country. These states that have these vertically integrated systems, the patients and the consumers are usually robbed of having choices of high quality craft and candor care products. That's just a generalization that we see. It remains true in a lot of different ways. Massachusetts, I went into the market with that in mind, with very low expectations on quality of flower specifically. As I'm a flower consumer, if you're making edibles or concentrates, you can kind of use lower quality stuff through the right methods and and techniques to bring out a pretty quality product. But a flower, the raw product, you can't fake the funk. You either do it good, good grow, nutrients, strains, curing, you see it in the finished product. You can't lie, you can't mask that, you can't take some bar, strip all the THC out and infuse it into an edible, right? That can't happen. Flower is the telltale for me as a consumer. How's this market doing with quality? I was pleasantly surprised at a couple of the places I went. Obviously, the pre-roll game seemed huge, which is everywhere. Pre-rolls sell at a pretty high level. As a personal consumer, I don't ever buy pre-rolls. I like to roll my own. But the pre-rolls were out there. I tried quite a bit. They were, I feel they are anywhere, even on the West Coast, hit or miss. There was some good, some okay, some not so great. I didn't find anything that was completely terrible. The flower, I was surprised though. I honestly was expecting low quality flower for the reasons I just kind of ranted about a second ago. But I really had low expectations on flower. The first facility I went to was the Nature's Heritage facility, which is owned by the MSO MaryMed. And again, just having MSO in mind, understanding those other thoughts, we were just talking about the market, and going to a facility that I believe was 70,000 square feet. So we're talking a larger scale commercial size grow. I had low expectations of the flower. I didn't necessarily go in there thinking it was gonna be boof, but I thought, maybe mids, upper mids at best. I honestly was really surprised going through the grow. It was immaculately clean, really good looking flower. And then another thing, I've been to hundreds of grows. Sometimes you go through a grow, it looks great, and then you get to the end product somehow with the cure and everything. I don't know. It looks great when it's in the ground, but when you get the actual flower in your hand, it's not what you thought it was gonna be. I was able to go to the Panacea dispensary down there, which is connected to the Nature's Heritage family, and grab some of their flower. And I honestly, as soon as I opened the jar, I took a smell and was like, wow, okay, the terps are there. I looked in and it looked great. I had a little bit of experience with the flower, and I was honestly, I told the guys there at Nature's Heritage, this is, hats off to you. Tim Shaw's one of the guys leading the crew over there. I told him that I was surprised. I went in with low expectations, and it not only exceeded my expectations, I was impressed. I really thought it was good flower. Doing the craft at scale is something a lot of people try to promise that or assign that positioning to their brand or their business model. And frankly, not a lot of people are able to deliver at that. In California, I'd say like an Ember Valley, not necessarily super commercialized scale as some people, but they still do craft, and they're able to do that by having a large facility with a lot of micro rooms inside that. So you're able to get craft, but then you get craft 10x, 15x, your rooms. Whereas opposed in Washington, a lot of the craft grows might be only 1, 2, maybe 3 of those rooms. Whereas you go to California, Oregon, Nature's Heritage out in Massachusetts, where you have those craft size rooms, but you have like 10 to 20 of them. So it is craft at scale, and there's a lot of people that claim that title, a few that I feel like can actually grab that Nature's Heritage. I personally thought, looking at their facility, trying their product afterwards, I'd say that they're accomplishing, that they're living up to what their mission statement is. Definitely impressed, definitely look forward to checking them out when I go out there. I interacted with a lot of people. They were one of the brands that was recommended. There's a couple other brands that were also recommended that we were able to try. Happy Valley being another one. I did a pre-roll review for one of their products, which was pretty good. And I really liked their branding. I really liked their store. I'm trying to think. We went to Garden Remedies, another place that was recommended. I liked what I had there. I really liked their store. I really liked their staff. Actually, I'll say that Happy Valley and Garden Remedies, both of their staff was really solid. I went in there just as a consumer. Didn't say I was here to press or doing that or anything. Just went there and got the real experience as a consumer. I liked that. I did go to Ascend downtown, which was recommended as something you had to see. Looked super pretty. Love the name. Love the logo. Love the area of town it was at. Really not a fan of the store. I did a pre-roll video for them, and I explained it in there, but a pre-roll review video from there. But they had a weird system where you come in and it's this small, tight room, and there's 3 iPads and 1 person helping you and a big line of people. So in a state where most people are uneducated and have questions, whether they're have the courage to ask them or afraid to ask them. It's not a very inviting environment. You know, you do get some one-on-one attention. I will say I cannot remember the woman's name who helped me there. I did mention her by name in the pre-roll video. She did an excellent job, excellent job. You know, anyone in Ascend watching this, give that girl a raise. But just the format, the setup, it was just really kind of uncomfortable, uninviting. You know, I'm a nerd and I'm there to do research, so I was asking a lot of questions, got a lot of care and candor, didn't feel like, you know, I'm probably annoying this person. They did not make me feel like I was doing so, but at the same time, there was quite a bit of people in there, and I'm sure everyone could have used help, and there was only one person to help all of us. So it was just kind of a goofy setup. Once you place your order on the iPad, then you walk in to the dispensary floor and wait for your order. So it's kind of weird. Why do you have this beautiful dispensary floor if you just are standing around waiting in it? Once you're in there, you can't be like, oh, what about that product over there? And that's the other thing. When you're ordering, you're in this tiny little room where you see no products. You have an iPad. You might as well just be ordering online. You can't see, not only can you not see like flower or smell or anything like that, you physically can't even see, oh, what about that over there? What about that? You don't get to see how things are displayed, ask about any of the brands, anything. It's just a really, really weird system. Was not a fan of it as a personal consumer, and I'm just not a fan of it in general outside of my own personal preferences. I don't think it's a very good model. Maybe that's how they have it set up for COVID and not what they intend to. I know they had mentioned they were going to expand to another floor and maybe give them room to do this, but you know, for the people at Ascend, you guys got to switch that up, man. It's really not a good model. Really, really, really not a good model. But salute to you. There's people in there. People recommended it, so people are going there. One of the things that was very prevalent, you know, coming from the West Coast, we've had cannabis, accessible cannabis, even outside of the adult use and recreational market. But our medical market was very accessible. And so we've had very accessible, high-quality cannabis for a long time. And along with that, maturity has given education and communication and community. Something that I notice in Massachusetts, unsurprisingly, with such a new market, you go in and ask a bud tender, well, what's here? And they immediately are like, oh, I'm the person you need to talk to. You're looking for sativa, indica, or hybrid. And then you are like, I don't really classify. I'm not really looking for things like that. I'm just looking to find what's the best quality in this category, that category, you know, edibles, flower, etc. And you get a lot of push of, oh, what's the highest THC percentage? Now that's very prevalent on the West Coast still. The majority of consumers are purchasing off of hybrid, indica, sativa, and they're purchasing off of THC percentage. And I get that. And stores should cater to that because that is the education level that most of the consumers are. For us that are a little more mature in our information and education around cannabis and just as consumers, you know, that stuff is the 100 level. We're at the 400, 500. We're past, you know, we're getting our master's degree as far as buying and asking questions on cannabis. So we don't necessarily look at it like that. So on the West Coast, I usually go into a dispensary, for example. You get kind of scripted in that. But then most bud tenders at good spots that I prefer to go to, can kind of identify, okay, this I don't need to give this guy the 100 level. He's already got that. Let's just talk about what the bud tender, what they're actually smoking, or if they're like, hey, this person over here to my left or right is the resident expert on all the flower or whatever, talk to them about their personal selection. So I know on the West Coast, I still have complaints on a lot of dispensaries. A lot of dispensaries have faced the same issues. But the maturity of the market allows me to go in as a consumer, as the maturity of myself as a consumer, and get better service. On the East Coast, it was like pulling teeth to be like, yo, I do not care about price. I do not care about THC percentage. I'm not even trying to look at sativa versus indica. I'm trying to know what is fire. What is the best quality stuff you have? And then once we can get those categories out, then I can start making my selection based on my preferences. That's just me as a consumer. I do that everywhere. I am very frustrated, again, in a lot of West Coast states with the same thing, but on the East Coast, it seemed like it was impossible to get past that THC percentage, indica, sativa, hybrid, just 101 level. But again, that is to be expected with their market. The majority of consumers going in there do not know much, and that is going to be the easy information they can retain and that 101 education that they need. So for me as a consumer, incredibly frustrating. For the industry as a whole, it's on par where it is in its market maturity, and it's how it should be. But a note out there to all dispensaries, whether you're a bud tender, an owner, a manager, whatever, Every single one of you guys, again, hundreds of dispensaries across the country, I'd say 90% of them, when I ask them what separates you from the store across the street, down the street, other side of town, they say our bud tender education. If every single one of you guys is separated from one another from bud tender education, nobody's separated. You're all going for the exact same value proposition. Meanwhile, as I've shopped to all these stores, the education isn't even that great. So the thing that you feel like separates you from the person next to you also feels like is the same thing that separates from you. And you guys are both not very good at the same thing. You need to pick a different value proposition or part of your branding or mission statement, whatever it is. You need to do some internal soul searching and work on that a little bit. This is prevalent coast to coast everywhere. Something that, my business partner Joey and myself and the team talk about very often. But Massachusetts, the market was no doubt still very guilty of that. So beyond that, another thing about the market out there is edibles. From what I gathered was 5 milligrams was the max edibles per piece. So if you have like a taffy or a candy or a soda or seltzer water, 5 milligrams is the max you can do per pack, per unit. So you could still do a 50 milligram pack of 10 edibles, but they're 5 milligrams each. Which is, again, this is something that's great for an immature market where there's not a lot of consumers with high tolerances, because edibles and overdoing edibles that has a long history, stigma, reputation behind it, a lot of it well-deserved. But that's a big part of the edible market. But out there, the way they set it up kind of curbs that. But again, for someone that's a more high tolerance person, I don't want to have to eat 20 candies to get to where I'm trying to go. Whereas in Washington and California, you can have 100 milligram single, drinks, beverages, or things like that. And, especially you're starting to see the smaller ones. So I can get 100 milligrams without having to drink a whole soda, as I'm not a soda consumer. In Oregon, I know they have the Adabanol, like cannabis syrup, and I believe it goes to 448 milligrams, which I love. Not to drink the whole 448, but I can just take a little bit of it. So I did notice out in Massachusetts, LEVIA has a tincture that I believe was 300 milligrams. It was a great tincture. I got some of that. I added it to a beverage, and that was doing me just proper. But also, on the note of the 5 milligram edible, LEVIA's infused seltzer is, I believe, one of the top selling seltzer or infused beverages across the country, and crushing it in the Massachusetts market. Absolutely crushing it. I believe they're on their way to get into some other markets, or they might already be in other markets. Incredible product. I toured their facility. Very, very impressed with the volume that they're moving, the quality of the product. We've already done content on it, so the packaging and branding looked on point, but going and seeing it and trying it, I'm not even that big of a seltzer guy. I tried their seltzer. I would drink it even if it wasn't infused. Great taste. I poured some out. One of the issues with infused beverages that I've noticed on the West Coast is they get cloudy. Whatever they infuse it with starts to separate, and it just gets cloudy. It's nothing wrong. It doesn't bother me. It just kind of looks unattractive. I'll still drink it. Still does the job. Doesn't affect the taste, but it does look kind of weird when you have a beverage and you see it all cloudy. It just is not that attractive unless you're selling like a hazy beer or something like that. But anyways, LEVIA, their seltzer seemed honestly clear as water. Great taste. They use the emulsion technology, which infuses cannabis with water, makes it water soluble. And again, I'm not a super expert on all this, so if I'm incorrect, feel free to roast me or correct me in the comments. But they use an emulsion technology to make water soluble THC. It's fast acting, so it's like an edible that's going to hit you in like 10 to 20 minutes as opposed to an hour and a half to two hours that most edibles do, which is great. At 5 milligrams, I loved it. I was out there for business, but if I was at like a barbecue and I had my kid around or something like that, and I was trying to indulge a little bit instead of a beer, but not take it too far, 5 milligrams or having 2 of those would be great for that, just kicking back and relaxing. For those consumers that don't have as high of a tolerance, that's a great 5 milligrams. You could have half of that and share it or save it for later, or drink the whole thing if you're have a decent tolerance. I say that again, I'm a personal consumer. I consume a high tolerance, but I understand a lot of people out there are very low on their tolerance scale. But it was a great product. Very impressed. The emulsion thing is something we've seen on the West Coast for years, but it's also I feel like the last few years people have invested into facilities and extraction techniques and are obviously so heavily invested. The technology and the processes have gotten better, but they're still sticking to what they spent their money on until they get their ROI on their investment before they upgrade and change. Whereas groups on these states that are just coming online are able to take not only the technology has been around, but the information, the trial and error of the last 5 years and really build upon that and make something great. And so the way LEVIA described it, at first I was like, man, everybody kind of says they're doing it better than this and that. But I truly believe after checking out their facility and trying the product that they've really been able to build on what the trial and error of what's happened on the West Coast. Great product, really excited to see them go other places and continue to grow. I'm trying to think of what else. You know, I was talking about edibles. I did get to go see at the Nature's Heritage Grow. They also produce the Betty's edibles, Betty's Eddies, excuse me. They make taffy. They have this taffy packaging machine that's around from like the 40s or the 30s. It's crazy to see that thing in action. I love saltwater taffy. I don't know if it's just a thing, you know, being in Seattle or on the coast, you see it. I don't know if it's saltwater, the ocean. I don't know. I just feel like I see saltwater. So even since a kid, I've always liked it. And so Betty's Eddies does these great infused saltwater or infused taffies, and they taste great. They honestly taste great. You know, my biggest gripe with edibles are they don't taste great. You're eating it simply for the functionality, not for how it tastes. So whenever I find an edible that I'm obviously consuming for functionality, but I'm like, I would eat that even if it wasn't infused. I really enjoyed it. That's a win. Those guys are hitting it right there. Trying to think of what else. I know Cookies is out in Massachusetts. I did not get a chance to try it. They weren't available anywhere I went in the Boston area. Again, back to the vertically integrated model. They're not necessarily that now, but that's how they started. So every brand pretty much has its own retail, and every retail pretty much has its own brand. And so whether you see that brand in other retails or that store, the house brand model is that we know on the West Coast from time to time, that is very prevalent out there. If you ask for flower, you're most likely, the brand name you're going to be told is going to be a dispensary, which is cool. But going back to the craft art rant that I was on a little bit earlier, having craft and multiple brands be able to compete for quality and different value propositions and places on the shelf really, and that friendly competition really heats up the quality and gives a better offering at price and quality to consumers. I know the market in Massachusetts is opening up specific licenses that are not vertically integrated, so we will see that. They do have an uphill battle to climb as coming new to market against an established vertically integrated license that has retail and distribution and all of that outlined. You know, they're kind of set up to scale very quickly, and you know, that store has more incentive to sell their own product than another brand. But if brands can build consumer and audience following and demand, no store is going to say no to what the consumers want. Consumers tell the stores what they want. So my advice out there to people that are getting started with micro business and brands, really build community audience first. If you build it, they will come. I promise you that. But it is an uphill battle to go against MSO financially backed, vertically integrated companies. It is what it is. And so that was a big part of the conversation out there, social equity and this craft versus commercial. Very, very big. Honestly, that conversation goes along nationwide. I feel like we have it somewhat set up here in the Pacific Northwest. California is kind of a mix of MSO and, you know, small owner-operated or craft brands, if you will. But I'm excited. I'm excited to get back out to Massachusetts. I'm excited to get back out to Boston. I need to eat more lobster rolls in my life, and I want to try some more of their products, their flour. We do have some reviews coming on the site. I just think the market out there is exciting. I really look forward to getting back. And again, the flower quality, I had low expectations. I know there's probably some people in Maine and stuff like that. They're like, man, you were smoking boof. You need to come a little bit further north. Next trip, let me know. I'm trying to come up to Maine. Please let us know, comments, DMs, emails. Where else do we need to check out? What other products do we need to try? Do we need to travel to Maine? Where in Maine? You know, anybody that's going to reach out with hospitality or recommendations, greatly appreciated. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you're on YouTube, make sure you hit subscribe. Please leave a comment below, even if it's hating. And we'll talk to you guys later.